All right, guys, today's video is going to be a little different. Today's video is about results, and I'm not talking food plot results, but I'm talking deer management results. How long does it take for maybe the work that I've put in here to show in my deer? That is a legitimate question. There's nothing wrong with asking that question to yourself, especially if you're a newer plotter. You get all excited, start seeing a bunch of deer show up. Eating out of your food plot makes you feel really good. So how long is it going to take for a deer to grow to a monstrous size? Now, overall, the easiest answer I could tell you is it's going to vary, which is very vague, but it is also mostly true. But here is a guideline that has presented some really good evidence done by the University of Mississippi's Deer Lab. If you have not seen that video, I highly recommend you watch it. It talks about captive deer that they took from different parts of the state, and they broke the state down into 3 regions. So I'm going to do the exact same thing. Tennessee is known by regions, 1, 2, 3. East Tennessee is considered the poor end of the state as far as deer quality. Middle Tennessee is a pretty good zone to a great zone depending on what part you're in. And then we got the western part of the state, which is located by the Mississippi River, which has numerous trophy deer taken out of it. Now, the question you're asking yourself is, well, what's the difference between the deer in East Tennessee and West Tennessee? There has to be a genetic problem. That is not necessarily the case. They discovered it is actually just the soil that's the problem. The amount of nutrition in the ground greatly affects how a deer looks. So my soil beyond the food plot is not that great a shape. I've got patches of okay stuff, and then the rest of it, needs some assistance. If your soil is like that or worse, you're not going to see a whole bunch of big deer. Occasionally, you might see that once in a lifetime looking deer that's, say in those 150 range or whatever. But now you got to start honing in on why you are not seeing deer bigger than that. So what they had done was a multiple year study on those deer. So they captured deer from the eastern part of the state, which is the smallest deer in general, and in the middle and in the west. That first generation, they put them on nothing but a straight 20% crude protein diet. 20% is considered the benchmark for growing big deer. The deer did not really show a lot of change. They didn't really put on too much weight except for your western deer. They responded a little bit faster to it. And then we move on to generation 1, which is the newborns that preceded that generation. All right, the deer from the western side got even larger. Hard to believe, right? You got all those trophy deer, yet they got larger, just on 20% crude protein, straight protein the whole time. Then the deer from the middle portion of the state also saw a pretty good increase in the size of the deer. Now, the deer in the eastern portion of the state did not reflect too much change, but there was improvements, a little bit better body weight, size, and of course antler size probably got just a hair bit better than what it was. And if you're on the eastern portion of the state and you've been food plotting for a while, suddenly you're not seeing much change in your deer, you need to wait. So we have the second generation that kicks in. Once again, the western portion of the deer, western part of the state, grew larger again. And then the deer in the middle of the state grew even larger and matched the western portion bucks. Now here's the most important thing. That second generation of deer that was from the eastern portion of the state matched the western deer. They all became roughly the same size, same big bodies, and I mean, you probably wouldn't be able to tell a difference. And for a person who never saw this test done, would probably scream you captured deer from one localized area because the deer herd had improved so much. So the thing to think about is when you start food plotting, It's going to take multiple generations to see your hard work come to fruition. And yes, anytime you start doing soil improvements year after year, those results will be reflected later on in the next generation and the next generation. The theory behind the study is that deer turn off expressive genetics if the natural habitat does not allow for it. So they will turn off expressive genes, which means bigger antlers, larger bodies. You start seeing far fewer kicker points or non-typical looking racks. They shrink down and look like your basic little 8s, maybe a small 10 or a big 6, something like that. Now, once the deer find a habitat that is suitable with loads of nutrition, suddenly those genetics can be turned back on, but not necessarily in that particular deer. It will be the offspring where those genetics will be turned back on, because the fetus relies on nutrition, and the more nutrition the fetus gets, the more of those genes are turned on. So that is the theory behind that study, and it presents tons of evidence that that is a very solid theory to go by if you want to watch that. Again, I will provide a link to that in the description if you want to watch it. I highly recommend it. So that's one reason why you need to be patient. And of course, what about the third generation? The third generation, which they didn't show, but they practically hinted at, we do not know the size limit of deer, because the western deer continued to get larger and larger every preceding generation. And then once the others played catch up and got to match the western deer, then you can follow suit. Next deer gets bigger, next deer gets a little bigger, and it will keep going until they can find an end point. And as of right now, the main question you should be asking yourself is, what is the top end? And if it's bigger than 200, if it's bigger than 300, just to give you an idea, there's some pen raised deer well over 400 inches of antler. Pen raised, not wild deer, pen raised deer. And I know everybody has different opinions on pen raised deer. I'm not going to state my opinion. I just study from them and try to learn some of their tactics to try to help these wild deer out. And there are some important things like stress levels. You want to keep those to a minimum if possible. So, there's different things that I try to pick up here and there from pen raised deer. I, in general, like free ranging deer. I do not like high fence hunting places. That's my opinion on that. So next time when you're out here staring at your plot, trying to put in another hard day's work and improving your plot, just remember, it's going to be those future generations that you're leaving the conditions better to them than you are the parents. So be patient, and it may take as much as 7 years to see those deer, because you got to remember, if those deer are born as generation 2, you're going to have to wait, if you can allow deer to age, an additional 4 to 5 to 6 years, depending on how much age you allow on a deer, before you can harvest it if you're trying to trophy manage your property. For guys that are around all kinds of people that it's brown, it's down, but you're trying to hold off on shooting smaller deer, I think you would be very surprised at what a 3-year-old can present. There are endless things, or endless videos that I've seen of 3-year-olds that are already Boone and Crockett deer. And that's because those people worked their tail off and of course had much better soil than I did. And it's possible you can get a Booner by age 3 if that's your goal. All right, guys, I hope you find this video interesting. If you like that content, hit that like and subscribe button. And I wish you all a wonderful hunting season as it approaches. Maybe some states are about to get going, and I know Tennessee is about to amp up its velvet hunt, which I will not be participating in, but we'll see what happens. You all have a great one.